You're listening to Lemons Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality. Welcome to this episode of Lemons Listening Library. I am your host, Randi Lemons, fantasy author, or RL Rose to those of you in the romance community. And I'm super excited to talk to our guest that we have today. But before we do that, we know we always have to do housekeeping. So if you guys are interested in joining any of our advertising services, please head over to Patreon or shoot us an email at lemonslisteninglibrary@gmail.com. Ask some questions and we'll give you some information on that. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, which this was a really short intro, so we get to jump into it way quicker than usual. Our guest today is Sierra. Sierra, will you please introduce yourself and tell me how bad I messed up your name?
Oh, you said it fine. My name is Sierra Zounes. I'm so excited to be on here. I signed up for this months ago, and I never knew this day would actually come, and it's here, which is awesome.
I know, I hate that we have to make people wait so long. Like our list, our application list is over 200 and we've had 30 people on it. So like
it gave me something to look forward to at the beginning of 2025. So I'm fine with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, you've been waiting in the wings, but also you did something really cool while you're waiting in the wings is you were a part of our L3 Human Voices Only event that we had last weekend.
That was probably one of the coolest book talk events I have ever been a part of. It was so neat.
Yeah. And you were a sponsor for it too. So that's something else I want to give a shout out for you on is like you helped donate to the grand prize that two of our people who participated won because all of our proceeds were like, my husband told me, he's like, if you get $1,000, you're just going to give it away. What's the point of it? I'm like, but that's the point. Like I want to give back to the community before I start, profiting off of it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I support what you do. We should be supporting our authors and other people who are involved with the author community and writers. So why not give back, right?
Right. Yep. And you definitely got some perks out of it. We got to make sure we highlight on your books and stuff like that every 4 hours because it was a 24-hour event.
Oh my gosh.
It was chaos, guys. You guys had to have been there.
I'm so glad you survived it and you're hopefully getting some recharges,
Yeah. We are. Yep, it's getting there. Battery is getting back to like 75% full, so So I want to hear more about you. Kind of tell us about what got you started in writing and where things began for you within this journey.
Gosh, so I grew up in a family of scientists and mathematicians and things like that. But I was always a bit of a reader as a kiddo. I did young writers camps and creative writing camps. I did my first open mic when I was 9 at Barnes and Noble. And it's cute because I still have the video of it and I still talk just as fast as I did then. But I enjoyed it. My parents gave me flashcards to alphabetize when I was a little kid rather than the math flashcards. I did journalism all throughout middle and high school. So as a whole, I just writing was a big center in my life, which is so funny how my family's like, why'd you become an English teacher? And I'm like, because it's writing. Why am I not an engineer? Because I don't do math in general. But
Right.
I ended up going to college for English. And I ended up becoming a middle school teacher for 6 years. And I loved it. And after I left teaching, I really started to think what do I want to do if I didn't have to care about what expectations were of me or anything like that? What would I do? And I wanted to write. I've always wanted to write. I've always wanted to write books and poetry and all that jazz. And so I said, why not do that now? So I talked to my husband about it because we're a partnership, so we should be on the same page. And he said, go for it. So, and now I have a book coming out in a few months and I'm really excited. So it's been a journey. It's been fun.
With your writing and stuff like that, it sounds like writing has always been a part of your life. Was that something that you turned to as an outlet? Was it something that just kind of rejuvenated you? You're like, I'm feeling burnout, so I go write? Or how did that play into your mental health?
I would say it would start with reading would be like the first thing for me, because to be a writer, you got to, be able to read a bunch. And when I was a kid, I read all the time. I read at the dinner table when I wasn't supposed to. I would be at family gatherings, and when I would feel like overwhelmed or things like that, I would go into the bathroom and like read. And it kind of got to the point where my parents were like, okay, you need to stop reading and talk to other human beings. But I read I read a lot, especially when I felt socially overwhelmed. I brought a book literally everywhere I went. I still do that today, in general, and now with cell phones and things like that, with digital books, it makes it even easier.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I
yes.
love the Kindle app. I love having the e-reader on your phone. All of it is amazing.
hmm And writing in a general is an excellent outlet for. I'm not like an amazing speaker unless I really write everything down, but I found
Right.
that
Same.
right? That I found that I can communicate far, far better if I wrote things down. I contribute that to how I got my husband, because we spent like the first year just texting each other. And I'm like, I think if I had to talk to him every day out loud, there's no way. So
Right.
well, every time I
He-
looked at
he-
his face, I'm like, oh, words, I can't think of what to say.
yeah.
Thank goodness for writing. That's how I got my husband.
He fell in love with your creative brain, and then he fell in love with your authentic brain later.
Oh my gosh, my scatterbrain.
Yeah. No, that's cute. And I agree with you. Like there are moments in my life where I'm like, "Can I just text this to you, please?" Like this conversation would be so much more deep and meaningful if I could just text this to you.
Exactly. So if I just have to write everything out first, and even if I write everything out first and it's supposed to be just notes and I'm looking at someone's face, and if I can't just read it verbatim, all that goes out the window. And I'm just like, I don't know. So,
Yeah, and that's a talent that I've had to develop with the podcast is like, I have my show notes. I send them to you guys. They're not something I follow by any means, but like in the beginning, the first couple episodes, I was like, okay, the questions that I'm trying to ask you, I'm like looking at the show notes and trying, and I sound so robotic and I sound so unauthentic, and I'm like, I can't do that.
mm,
I need to be authentic. This needs to be a conversation. I need to just be my authentic self, whether that's stumbling over my words, whether that's repeating something because I said it incorrectly. That's part of being human, and just not beating the hell out of myself of like, people are going to watch this.
they're going to hear my voice. They're going to hear me trip over my words. I don't know if they're going to understand me because I talk like the end of an ad where they're listing out all the secondary symptoms of a medication.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although that's actually why I really started going towards like spoken word and slam poetry, because I'm like, they speak really fast. I speak really fast.
Oh,
Let's put it
this is
together.
made for me. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, no, I like that. And you started, so your first open mic when you were very young, was that poetry? Was that, what was it that you did? Did you read? I'm thinking comedian, like when you say open mic.
I know. So there's so
I'm like,
many.
get out there and tell some jokes.
I am not funny, but that's okay. But generally speaking, the open mics I always did was for writing. So when I did like Young Writers Camp and I did that first open mic, it was like a little concrete poem about my dog's tail, where I drew it like my dog's tail. And then I wrote like a story about like a girl that went into like the attic and found like these secret keys to these secret worlds. So I was super into fantasy, and I know like there's a lot of controversy around this author, and I totally understand and agree. But honestly, what got me into fantasy and reading was the Harry Potter series, because I was like in third grade,
Yeah.
and it was like the first series that I was like, there's magic involved, and there's a girl with really frizzy brown hair that doesn't always get along with everyone, but is super smart and loves to read, and that is like my life. So that's what really got me into
Yeah.
reading and fantasy and all that jazz.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a space that people need to understand of like, if I enjoyed something and if something happened in my past to where at that time the knowledge that I had revolving around that information I consumed was innocent,
Yeah,
was me enjoying it, the shaming of what happens later, that person does later, whatever, it sucks.
yeah.
It's like I enjoyed it whenever it was this innocent thing, with the knowledge I had at that time. There's no reason to shame and blame and just cancel culture the hell out of people because of that.
Right. I get that. And I mean, we hear so many things about like people like Neil Gaiman was another one I was kind of like really upset about. So, but
I know. Oh my gosh, I loved his books.
right. Uh,
Like his voice too. Did you ever listen to his
I
audiobooks?
didn't.
Because he would narrate his own stuff.
Mm.
And so it has that like that accent that he's got, and I'm like, okay, okay, this is great.
Ah, Lordy. But yeah, that's kind of what got me into writing poetry and fantasy and things along those lines. And I loved Goosebumps growing up. So like little kid
Oh yeah,
horror with R.L.
yeah.
Stein, and that also like
I liked it
contributed.
just because it had my initials in it.
Oh my gosh, that's so great though.
Yeah.
That's one way to contribute it. It's so funny. I found this list, like, when you were a kiddo and you had the reading challenge or whatever, and you had
Oh
to write
yeah.
down the books that you read. I found mine from like fourth grade, and it's like a bunch of like the ghost of whatever, or like this fantasy of these other like goosebump books. And I'm like, well, that contributed to a lot of my writing. Woo!
This explains everything.
Mm.
That would be a really cool trend to start, is like having authors go back and look at like their library checkout list of when they were in like middle school and share that with
Oh,
everybody.
that'd be very embarrassing. The amount of Twilight books I read when middle school.
Same.
Oh,
Twilight. I've got me some Aragon. I've
hmm
got me some yeah,
I was
yep.
super into Maximum Ride also, like James Patterson books. So things like that.
Yeah.
Stephen King, though, I like started reading in seventh grade, which was intense. And I'm like, I shouldn't have been reading that in seventh grade. But there you go.
Right.
Found it
Yeah, yeah.
in the bookshelf.
Yep, yep. Nope. It's interesting just how culture shifts and changes, and how it's like the things that we enjoyed and really found, I'm going to repeat this word again. I swear I can, I'm an author and I come up with a good vocabulary, but the enjoyment that we found as children, now it's cringy, and it's like, how did we get here? Like, how are we shaming our younger selves for just enjoying something that at that time we loved?
We change and we adapt as the world changes and adapts, and we learn things. That's why education is so important.
Yeah, for sure. Something I always say is like, my opinions that I have now are based off the information I have now, and I always reserve the right to change that in the future and disagree with my past self.
Yep, absolutely. And that's not waffling. That is basically adhering to new information.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk more about how, okay, you had your very smart family. Everyone's scientists. Everyone's doing something. The stakes are high with like your expectations from your parents, I imagine, of like, when you grow up, you're going to be this, pedestal person.
Mm.
Was that hard to be like, hey, I'm actually going to be a writer, and that's just as awesome as being a scientist?
A little bit. So I decided like I didn't want to tell people I was going to be a writer growing up because I was like, that's not allowed. You can't do that. And I remember telling someone, it was an adult, that I wanted to be a writer growing up, and that was in like eighth grade. And it was the first time I really said it out loud. And what the adult told me back, they said, "Well, you better marry a rich man." And that I
Oh.
know, and that killed it for me. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to get married, which is wrong, but I guess I can't do that. And I loved writing, but I just decided maybe I can't do it, And I'm like, what's the closest thing to it? I guess I love books and I love to read. And I started teaching martial arts in middle school and I love teaching. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll teach English instead. And I was like, I guess that's a step up in that way. So I
You had to compromise with your dream though. Like
yeah,
that
no,
did that
absolutely. And that was not okay. Not great.
mm,
Not that I don't like teaching English or anything like that. Like I love my students and everything, but it wasn't what I really truly wanted to do, you know?
yeah.
So I made some compromises, kind of going forward, which really eventually, like, affected your mental health when you start doing something that is overwhelming and not truly what you think you're supposed to be doing with your life, you know?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
And I think that aligning with your authenticity is one of the most powerful tools you can do, and one of the hardest and scariest things that you can do
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, it was scary making this decision to tell my family and tell people that I'm like, yeah, I quit teaching like full time, and now I'm writing books. I got a whole variety of responses to that. They're like, okay, so you're having a breakdown. It's gonna be
Oh.
okay.
How
um,
deflating, right?
yeah.
Like your moment of like breaking out of this is they view it as your moment of crumbling.
Right. They're like, you're crumbling. And then like months later, they're like, so you're going back to teaching, right? I'm like, no, how many times do I have to say that? I'm not doing that right now. Um, Overall, I say
Yeah.
a lot of this, but like my family has been supportive. Like overall, it was a change. My brothers are,
Well, they're coming from a place of love. They're coming
yeah.
from a place of like, I want to protect you. This is scary for
Mm.
me. For them, it's probably scaring them because they probably wouldn't do something like
Oh my
that. So
God.
it 100% is coming from a place of love on their part.
Yeah, and now that's been over like say a year and a half, 2 years sort of deal. They've come to terms with it for the most part. My mom came to terms with it way earlier on. I think she has said like ever since I was little, she's like, I knew you were gonna do that. At some point I knew you were gonna do it. So now you're doing it, and that's what I was expecting. And
Yeah.
my dad like came to terms with it too. He just wanted me to be healthy and happy again. And writing kind of made
Yeah.
me be able to find that again. And so he ended up supporting it. And my brothers were always super supportive, and my husband, of course. So my little brother started making a Reddit page for my book that's coming out. He's like, I'm making a Reddit page. What's the blurb? So it was
Oh,
really funny.
that's cute. The little things that people can do to offer support and show that they're in your corner, it means so much. Like even just something as simple as a Reddit page, or they go on and they review it, or whatever. Like, those little things I think are so meaningful and impactful.
I agree. And it's nice to have people in your corner, you know?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the validating thing, right? And people thrive so much from community. When your community doesn't validate like your dreams and your hopes and your passions, it's like I feel so isolated and alone now. So
Yep. There you go. Good luck.
you mentioned that you started doing martial arts, and that is so first off, I think that that is a creative outlet that people it's such an underrated creative outlet. Me personally, started doing mixed martial arts as in like amateur fighting. So
Yeah.
I would get in the ring and MMA, that sort of thing. I found that like my high school year, so I was 18. So I like 6 months before I turned 18, I was just training, training, training. And then as soon as I turned 18, I was like, yeah, now I can get in the ring and I can go fight. It was like this huge pivotal moment for me, but I loved it. So much of my anger just went out the window. Like I was this angry, hateful teenager, and now I'm like this calm, scary person in the ring.
Do you still do MMA? Like you still fight?
I wish.
Ah,
Oh my gosh. No, no. When I got pregnant with my son, I quit. But I did jujitsu for a while after that, and that was amazing. But there is a thing with people, insecure people who you start rolling with as a
yeah.
female, and their intent to make sure that they do not lose to you is so aggressive that I'm just like, it's probably not something I would be interested in getting back into. Completely out of shape 10 years later.
Yeah, certain martial arts styles do tend to lean that way, unfortunately. I'm very lucky to be part of a community that's thankfully not like that, which is nice.
That's awesome. So, what did you find when you got into it? Like, was it some release for you? I'm interested in hearing like your point of view on that.
Oh my gosh. So I started when I was 6. My mom and my older brother started when he was 6. And then my little brother, my mom was searching around and she wanted, because we're short, and she's, especially for me as a girl who's short, she's like, we need to make sure you know how to protect yourself. And she said I wasn't allowed to quit until I got my black sash. And then I got my black sash and I just kept going. But I was a really quiet kid, really shy, scared of everything, essentially, which feeds into my books. I'm like, when you're scared of everything, that leads to really good writing material for fear. But in general, so
Right. Yeah, it's authentic and personable.
oh yeah, so um, being able to do martial arts, it took me like a little while for me to start feeling confident, I guess, within myself. And it really started happening in like the end of middle school because I saw my older brother earn his black sash and I sat there watching him do that test. And I was like, I am not doing enough for this. So I started going like all the time. And honestly, that's where I met my husband. And he's a few years older than me. And he would always come up to me and be like, you need to call out group class, be assertive, call out group class. I see you. And he bowed to me and things like that. And at the time, I'm like, oh, someone noticed me. Like, I'm here. And people recognize me as someone who is like higher ranking and have a little bit of authority. And that really, really built my confidence to just stand as myself a little bit. And it was great too because I did a bunch of performances. Lunar New Year's coming up for any listeners that celebrate Lunar New Year. It's the year of the snake. I got like 15, 20 performances because I also do lion dancing and dragon dancing and martial art performances. So I do a bunch of those things. And honestly, martial arts taught me structure, it taught me organization, it taught me follow through, which all of that goes through into your writing, because writing can be a very, in a way, kind of a lonely sort of profession. And you sit there on your own and you don't always have other people saying, wake up, it's 9 o'clock, you gotta write, or nine, you got to be able to push that for yourself, even if you have like an accountability partner or something along those lines. And then whenever you hit setbacks,
the discipline is rough,
right? And whenever you hit setbacks, because even as writers, you're going to hit setbacks, especially once you start querying. If you start to query, you're going to get rejections.
Yep.
But for every rejection you got, it means that you tried and you should keep going. But being able to push to that and be like, it's not a setback, it's just the next step, and you just keep going forward. So, and I learned that
100%, 100%.
So yeah.
And I feel like, so okay, you write fantasy, correct?
I write poetry, fantasy, dark fiction.
So with like your dances and the martial arts that you do, is there any like elemental stuff in there where they control elements to where like, you know what I'm saying? Like the Avatar, The Last Airbender, like the stuff that they do, the dances they do to unlock their energy. Do you incorporate stuff like that into your stories?
Oh my God. So I have a series that's not out yet at all. And I'm hoping to get the first book out at the end of the year. It's a different series sort of deal that for sure like incorporates that sort of mentality of being able to, like, I don't want to say superpowers because it feels pejorative, but the ability to like utilize those elements and fight is something that's like so much fun. But I use that. But also like even in my fantasy, like they're fighting monsters and things like that. So they need being able to write those scenes where we are able to demonstrate the fighting aspect of it is so cool. And even like the mental focus aspect as well. Like you're going into the ring with this being. Where are you mentally at? What are you looking to do next? How are you feeling when you're actually getting hit? Because, as a martial artist, we get hit, we block, we try.
Right. And I feel like there's not a lot of description. Like I'm thinking back to books that I've read in the past and I'm like, oh yeah, they just kind of took it. And then later on it affects them. But no, that happens in the fight and it can alter how you fight.
I'm like, yeah, adrenaline will only do so much. So let's see how it affects them in the middle of that fight. So being able to embed that's really important.
That's cool. That's cool. I think that it's so fun to hear authors talk about the stuff that they can write about in their stories that like people tell you all the time, write about what you know, write what you know. And whenever we talk to people about what they know and then how it translates into their writing, it is such a cool experience for me to be like, oh, Sierra's fighting scenes are probably pretty badass and I'm going to go read those.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I try.
That's really cool. You did that. So you have been doing that for 22 years.
Yeah,
roughly.
I do. So I teach Kung Fu, Tai Chi, and MMA, which includes kickboxing, grappling, weapon sparring, and push hands. So yeah, I've been doing that since I was 6. I am 28 now. I'll be 29 in June. I keep trying to remind myself. I'm like, oh my God, 30's coming up. I'm a young millennial, early Gen Z. It's so strange. I'll never have a house, but that's fine.
Yeah, right. This market is not set up for you guys.
No, not in San Diego.
Yeah, I know you guys missed that mark a couple years ago when it plummeted.
Oh my gosh, I had no money back then either. It's all good.
Right, right. It's all about the opportunities now.
Right.
That was obviously a piece that needed to happen the way it did.
Exactly. There you go.
So you talk about having like stress-induced
Oh,
blackouts during
yeah.
your teaching career. Like what was that like and what do you think attributed to it?
It was like terrible. So essentially, what happened? So I've been teaching for a few years. I ended up getting into a new coordinator position, and I took on two coordinator positions. One I had kind of done the year before, and then one that was brand new to me. And I was kind of on the edge of wanting to do it. But I loved the program itself, and I was like, this is good for me, and I believe in the cause and things like that. However, I was also agreeing to do it under the assumption that I was having someone coming in and helping me because we're supposed to have an assistant that's supposed to help. And then 2 days prior, she called me, and I love her dearly, and I hope the best for her. But she left, and then they never hired anyone. So I was in charge of these two huge programs, one for like the district and one that's like a national sort of deal program alone. And then I taught martial arts at night, and it was after COVID. So, and I know people were really worried about the academic regression when it came to COVID, but as teachers, it's the social regression, especially in these middle schoolers. That was really difficult to manage. And
What
especially,
did that look like for
oh
you guys? Like
God.
yeah, I'd be interested in hearing about
So
that.
I'll give you a couple stories, but it was interesting. So if I were to put on my psychologist lens on, not keeping their hands to themselves as like eighth graders, 14, 13-year olds. I'm like, I get that for elementary, but part of it's probably because they're like, they've been at home, especially with their siblings, and siblings fight. And if they had been at home for
Right.
like 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, that's how they know socially how to work with each other. They've also been messaging each other online, and we know online personas can be kind of rude and mean because they don't see them face to face. And they started bringing that in person. Also, the
Oh.
idea that like school can be tough, but we do school, and while you might not use everything you learn from like academics or things like that, you learn how to push through, and you learn how to go through adversity and how to like problem solve. And they really struggled to figure that out. So their stamina was really low. So the moment they'd had a problem, a lot of them would just be like, I'm done, I quit. And I was like, how do you do that?
Mhm.
So that affected a lot of their mental health. So I had students, like I had one, I was on the second floor, try to jump in the middle of class, the second floor. That was really scary. I had another girl who took scissors in the middle of class and was like, so that was really bad.
Oh,
She wasn't actually trying to, but, self harm in the middle of
yeah,
class,
yeah, still.
which was horrifying that year. A day before I finally had like the full blackouts and everything, I had what's it called? A field trip, and the kids got into a fist fight on the field trip to the college. There was a lot of stuff going on in general, but like I said, I was also in charge of these like very specific programs, so there were more needs involved. But it's just really hard to do it alone, which was actually something I learned as I've gotten older, because I've always like, when you're young, you're like, oh, I can do it. I can do anything. I push forward. Everything's worked out so far on my own. So this should work
And
out
then your
too.
body says, "No, you can't."
Exactly. So basically all that happened. And I remember taking my car in. My car that week also blew a tire on the way to school. And I remember,
Like the perfect storm.
yeah, and I just remember thinking, I have to get to school. There's no way I can miss today, even though I'm like here and I'm dying mentally, and my car has exploded, and I ended up driving the rest of the way there on like a spacey split tire. I know, not good. Don't do that, folks, in general. But I eventually got a spare tire, and I took it to the tire place to get it fixed. And I called my husband. I'm like, I need you to pick me up, sort of deal. And I sat down, and all of a sudden he was there. And I'm like, how did you get here so fast? I'm like, he's like, I've been like this to you. And I was like literally sitting outside just like this. And I don't remember any of it at all. And he kind of had
Oh
like
my
carried, it was
goodness.
really bad. He had like carried me to my car. And he ended up taking my schedule for the evening because I teach martial arts, and he started taking that. And the next morning I woke up, and the world was so dizzy and so spinning. And may this be a warning to you all, don't go to work if you're feeling that way. But I was like, I have to be there. I have to be there. I have to be there. That stress sort of grounds in your brain.
Yep, yep.
So I went, and I taught most of the class. And then like halfway, I was like leaning on the wall like James Dean, all cool like, but I'm like trying to not fall over. And I was like, okay, today's Family Fun Friday, last 30 minutes, you guys can go play cards and board games while I sit here and talk to my aides. Sort of deal. So it was not good. I made it work. So they figured it out. They left. Thankfully, it was my prep period next. I was supposed to have a whole meeting online, and the vice principal had walked in. I love her dearly. She was a wonderful vice principal. But she came in. She's like, Are you okay?" Sort of deal. And I'm like, "No, no, yes, no." I'm like really dizzy, and then I would start talking, and then all of a sudden I would like stop talking because I would forget what I was saying, or you know. So she's like, "You need to leave." She's like, "We're gonna call someone. We're gonna get you out of here." So she ended up getting like the counselors, and I remember very little after that point. I was told my husband's also a seventh grade teacher in the district, and he's
Oh, nice.
amazing. He's got tenure now, and he's wonderful at it, and he's so good. But they ended up calling his school to get him to get me. So they said that I was like, kind of like, it would take me a really long time to respond. It was hard to get me to stand up. I would forget what I was like, all these things, and I don't really remember it, but I do know they like took me to urgent care at first. And at first they're like, "Yeah, your pupils aren't dilating the same way. Go to the ER." So they took me to the ER.
Wow.
And then they decided after all these hours of being there, they're like, "Your body's exhausted. Go home." And I know, I'm like, well, that's helpful.
Don't you like how they're like, let's scare the hell out of you and then tell you it's your fault, you're pushing yourself too hard?
I
Stop
have
it.
so many opinions on the particular insurance that I have that I will not name, but I have a lot of opinions about it. And I still have it. But anyway, I ended up being like, they're like, "You should take."
And I still have it.
It was really good for physical things, just not mentally. But it's not great. We need to change. But so they told me, my principal's like, "Yeah, you should definitely take a week off from school." So I took a week off, and it just was not getting better. Like the vertigo kept happening every time I stood up. I started thinking about it. And like, because I was teaching these specialty classes, there was like no curriculum for people to like be able to follow and things like that. So I was still writing things and grading stuff and working from home. And I had kids emailing me. They're like, "This kid is being loud and mean to the sub." And I'm like, "I'm sorry. I can't do anything about it." So anyway, so it's been like 6 years. I basically took 0 sick days during those 6 years. So I had a lot stacked up. So I was out for several months on basically sick leave. And then by the end of that sick leave, they said, at least I was going to say the name. My insurance company said that they're like, "You need to quit." They're like, you have to quit. We will not allow you to take more time off. We will not write you sick leave for this. I remember, so it's been like a couple of years now at this point, but I remember signing up for like therapy and things, and I filled out the survey, and immediately I get this call from like the therapist they assigned me to, and they're like, "You need to go into like this like group facility, like a facility thing, sort of deal. Like those are your numbers. You need to go." So I said, "Okay." So I call Kaiser. I called the place up. Anyway, and I tell them what they said, and they said, "It's for serious issues. You're not one of them."
Excuse the fuck out of me.
I know, right? It was so bad. Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not even going to go through the rest of it. It was there was many, many different things, but I'm like, I can't drive. I can't stand up. I can't do any of these. Anyway, they're like, "Well, sounds like you just got to quit." And I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, so I'm sitting at home.
You mean I have to stop my income, which, the whole point of insurance is paying you for situations like this if it happens. Thanks for dropping the ball.
Right. And I was also the one who had the insurance for my husband also. And if they had like gone, they're like, "Well, we don't know if we can actually switch you over. So you might have no insurance for several months, and neither will your husband." I'm like, "What?" So I did a lot of fighting with HR and all that jazz, and I was able to thankfully get that all set up. But during that time, especially the first week that I was like out, and I'm sitting here like, I can't keep doing this. And it was a really hard decision. I cried all the time because I love my students, and I still do, and I hope they're okay. And I still think about my students from 6 years ago, and I'm currently doing a long-term sub thing, and I think about my students now. And I'm like, I can't leave them. I can't leave them. I can't leave them. But I also can't leave me either. And I felt like I left myself
Yeah.
a long time ago. So I was sitting over the couch over there, and I'm sitting at my Chromebook, and I'm like, or my Chromebook, whatever, my laptop. Kids all have Chromebooks, they're horrible. But my
Right.
laptop, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what would be my absolute dream schedule if nothing mattered? It didn't matter what people said. It didn't matter how much money, whatever sort of deal. And I wrote out this whole writing schedule where I got up in the morning and I worked out and I wrote and I worked out more and I wrote and I got to actually clean the house and make food with my husband and actually spend time with him. And I showed it to my husband and I'm like, this is what I want to do. Do you like support that at least for the next month to see what it's like? And he's like, you know what? Whatever it takes to make me not have to drive you to the ER and the hospital all the time, because that was scary for him too. Like, we think about the people who like are in that emergency situations happening to them. We don't always think about the people who's taking them there. And
Yeah.
that was a lot for him
Yeah.
too. So I started doing that and writing all the time.
I
And
want to point on that
oh
really
yeah,
quick. I just love your awareness of that, right? Like
yeah.
self-awareness is great, but whenever you can have enough self-awareness that it kind of extends out and you know how like your actions are affecting other people, and obviously that's not something you can control, so it's not like your actions did it, but what you were going through affected him and you can be like, "Hey babe, I know this is hard on you too."
Mhm.
What a relief of just feeling seen from him with you.
Oh, thanks. Well, I always joke that I found my book boyfriend before I found my book. So he's my book. I love him. So
That's a good way to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I hate him.
Oh, and I just love that he's like, yes, I support this. There's no shame in like, first off, the amount of work that you put into like, what is it? What's good for me? How can I do this to where it serves me and I'm putting myself first? And then you take it to him, like you said before, this is a partnership. Let's talk about this. Does this look good to you? And then he's so supportive and not because like he could have very easily been like, I don't know if we, and instantly that's gonna make you feel
Yeah.
bad. Instantly that's gonna like deflate this is what I need, and you're bringing it to him in that way, and then he's like, well, your needs don't matter. He's like, no babe, I see your needs. Let's make sure this is happening for you because also your needs are scaring me. Like
Mm.
the fact that you're not getting them met is scaring me.
Oh yeah, it was scaring me too. Holy moly. But yeah, then I started writing all the time, and I don't know, felt like who I used to be again, and alive. And I just
did
pushed forward.
you how Did you put any of that aspect in, because that's scary. Like
Mm.
I'm sorry, but regardless of how short that was, regardless of what the doctors said, regardless of them saying, oh, it's something that, time and stress, and that's scary.
Mhm.
That's still going to affect you. Did you find any way to put that into your writing to like put your characters through something similar?
Yeah, so the book that I have coming out, so she's like a medium essentially, and she sees ghosts, and she's seen that ever since she like turned like 12 essentially, sort of deal. And the fact that she's the only one that's able to see these kind of terrifying apparitions and to have like a parent that left and didn't support that and like left her at that young age because of it, and another parent that's like, don't worry about it. You're fine. Don't worry about it, which are two separate ends of the spectrum that are both not helpful. So being able to like
Yeah.
having this individual, this character, like self-medicating with like alcohol, things like that, and just living life kind of like with constant, like their life is just being duct taped together a little bit, through like personal like
Yeah.
CBT in a way is kind of something I really infused in this book. And like I said, I have so many other like manuscript brain ideas for something else too that I would love to do, but that's kind of how I filtered that in with this character and having them still find a
Yeah.
way to be strong, you know, even with all that going on.
Yeah, I love that. That makes it feel so real too, and readers can feel like, oh, I don't think anyone ever thinks, oh, this person went through something similar. But when you read the books and I guarantee all the big books that people have read and they connect with very, very deeply, there's an aspect of that author's life that makes it to where they can make that so authentic and real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we try for that.
Yeah. So how does stress look for you now? How do you manage that with something so scary happening to you? Um, I imagine there's like this radar of like, oh, I'm getting too stressed.
Mhm.
Like, don't want to go back to that again.
Yeah. So um, basically, like I still need money, sort of deal as my writing goes off its feet, sort of deal. So I took a lot of time off and I slowly started subbing again and things along those lines. But on days where I'm like, I feel overwhelmed, I feel stressed, like I can't get up to see people, I'm going to take that day off. And that was, which I know for some people, they're like, I'll take the day off. That was really hard for me to ever be
Yeah.
able to do, to be able to be like, you can't just push through all the time. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't ever push, but you need to be able to understand yourself to be able to be able to decide what's best for you in that current moment. So that's a big thing for me is knowing how to when to stop because sometimes stopping is important. You can't just be go, go, go all the
Yeah.
time. So that's something for me in particular that I still work on. Learning to say no is also a big one for me because I
Yeah, that one can be hard.
that one's really difficult, especially when you know the other person doesn't want you to say no. But being
Yeah.
able to say that because I find myself saying yes and then going, hold on, let me actually check my schedule before I actually confirm that because I just said yes without actually checking. um,
Right.
and
And getting to and we train people too in our lives. Like if we are a yes person,
mm,
people know that they can come to you and get away with whatever they need to. So we train them to be able to treat us like that.
yeah,
And then whenever we start setting boundaries for them, it's like, whoa, wait, you're changing the dynamic here. This isn't cool.
it's the same way with teaching. That's why some of the kids are like, oh, they're really strict in the beginning. And I'm like, well, we kind of have to be, otherwise, the moment we start pulling in the reins later in the year, you're going to push back really hard. So,
Yep. Testing those boundaries. Man, humans are funny with that. Like and we do it, I do it with my husband, my kids do it with me. Everyone does it to the people in their lives and we're not doing it from like a crappy place. We're doing it to see what does this dynamic look like with two people and we look for our own needs. We serve our own needs. That's something human nature does. And they're like, okay, well, what can I get out of
mm.
this? And then let's push this way, let's test it this way. And it's just interesting how humans operate like
Oh,
that.
yeah. We're clever creatures.
Yeah, yeah. We are lazy
Yeah.
creatures. We want our natural, like our brain works for the easiest
Mhm.
path to get through things and the most comfortable or not comfortable. Uh
The path of least
what is the
resistance,
word? Yeah, like the path we've been through before that we know because we've done it before. And it's like going out of that is scary
Mhm.
whatsoever. Even if it's better. Like it could be so much better for you,
Oh, yeah.
but it's still scary because it's not your normal. So I that is a lot of stress and a lot of life that you lived in a short amount of time, right?
Yeah.
And then you started writing and you started going into that, which is a whole other pressure thing.
Mm.
Um, you submitted your first 10 pages to Writer's Digest. Is that the first time you've ever submitted anything?
Yeah, so it's funny. What really got me off the ground, so I'm looking at your dog in the background. He looks like a little sausage. It's very cute.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
but
He
for
died.
real. But I remember early on in the year just being like, you got to get your writing out there. Let's just do some contests for fun. And I submitted a short little horror story called Duck, Duck, Duck into Writer's Digest for the annual competition. And I forgot about it. And then later that year in like August, July, August, I got a notification that I got an honorable mention award. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. It turns out my writing's like okay. And I'm like, I should do more of this more often. And I randomly found that program on Writer's Digest where it says, yeah, send in your first 10 pages. We'll pair you up with an agent. They'll tell you what's going to keep an agent reading that's currently in your manuscript, what's going to stop them from reading. Here are some suggestions. And then you fix it and you give it back to them. They give you more feedback. And I thought that was super cool. Even though I was thinking about just going pure indie publishing, I was like, why not? Might as well do that. So I did it. And the next day, I immediately got an agent who wrote me back saying that she wanted the complete manuscript, but she loved it. She thought it was amazing. And I was like, oh The issue is that I thought I only needed 10 pages and I only had 3 chapters done.
Oh.
And I said, yes.
Oh no.
I said, give me a week. And they said, okay. And I sat for hours straight on my computer and I wrote the whole book in the week. And I'm like, here it goes. And there it goes. So I ended up sending that to her and sorry, the cat food's coming out, and they really liked it.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, she really liked it. She did say she didn't end up representing me because it wasn't her genre, but she really liked it and she pushed for me. And that was what really got me to believe I can do it. I'm like, someone who's been in the book publishing industry for so long thinks it's worth something good. And beyond like what I think it's worth, knowing that as well was great, was kind of cool to know.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, maybe I can like pitch this around and see. So I started pitching around and looking for like publishing things and looking for agents. And then I randomly found this like new like little indie traditional publishing press called Fox and Dagger Publishing with Mallory. And I was like, ooh, dark fiction with romance and fantasy and found family. I'm like, this is like my style. So I started looking into it, and it was her whole thing was all about bringing the trust back between the writer and the publisher, because I know that's been lost throughout the years. And I loved her indie values, so I submitted, and she ended up really liking it. So that's why I'm working with
that's
her.
amazing.
So yeah, so I ended
Yay, congratulations.
Thanks.
I mean, way past tense, but still, you still deserve congratulations for
I
that.
appreciate it. But I started doing that. So that was like one thing I started doing. And then another one, because I have a poetry comic book coming out through World Stage Press in May. And I figured that out because I was on a plane coming back from my little brother's wedding, and I found this Instagram ad for the Community Literature Initiative, which is like a program where kind of affiliated with USC, where you work with a poet and things like that in a class, and they help you develop your manuscript and everything, and they make like a firm copy, and then you meet with a bunch of publishers to hopefully get published. And I thought it was super cool, and I ended up auditioning for it with my spoken word, and I got in. And I did the whole program, and I ended up writing this book and drawing for it, and a publisher liked it. So they ended up taking that, and then they asked me if I could teach the class. And now I'm the teacher of the San Diego chapter. So that's how I'm getting my writing kind of out there.
That's so cool though. Like, wait, you're so right. The affirmation, the confirmation of like, I'm a writer, this is what I want to do, and also I'm good at it. Like a double win.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing that worked out like that.
Thanks. Yeah. And like, I know I don't want to be like, if someone else tells you you're good, that's what matters most. Really, it's like about you as the writer. If you love your writing, you deserve to just keep writing. Like, you're your first audience. The rest of the audience will find you as well as you kind of go around. But it does help to have some outsiders be like, this is decent. And that they don't know me as a person is really cool.
Yeah. And another thing to that too is like when writers first start off, it's not unless you like in your situation, you've done a lot of writing throughout your life, you've played with words, you've played with how they structure together. But some writers start off never having done that. And even though it's something that they believe is a passion for themselves, there's still fundamental things that they need to learn to, really tell a good story. And I think that, having that little bit of like, okay, we know that this is what you want to do, but you've got to put some more work. Like, okay, think of it for like a workout session, right? You want to work out, but your form's not good. You can potentially hurt your writing long term if you don't work on getting your form correct with the way that you write. I think that's a good way to describe it, maybe.
Exactly. And you got to do pre-work for that. That's why it's so important to read within your genre and outside your genre. You got to read if you're going to write,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think that this opportunity for you was it so that you started working are you working for the publishing company now? Is that what you said? Or
so I'm working with the Community Literature Initiative program for poetry, but I was signed on as an author for the Fox and Dagger Publishing for my series.
Gotcha. And then the one before that, you said it was a small press?
Yeah, World Stage Press for poetry. Yeah, small press in LA.
Yeah. So it was that person who reached out to you, was that like a literary agent, or do they have people within their community like that are kind of like literary agents, but it's
So
different?
for World Stage Press, basically what happened, it was through the Community Literature Initiative. I did the whole class, and they have something called the Beach City Writers Conference. And because I had my whole manuscript done, they bring in like 12 to 15 publishers for me to do like, it's almost like, the speed dating publishing. So I went to like
Oh,
12
that's
different
cool.
ones, and I just pitched and pitched and pitched and read my writing and shared about me, and that's what stuck.
That's interesting. How did you get it? You said you found that on
Oh
Instagram?
my gosh, yes. Okay. So when I first got on there, I was so scared that it was a scam. And I'm just like, what if this program's not real? Because Instagram scares me sometimes. And then the audition was
Right.
in a library, kind of close-ish to me. And I remember going to the library and texting my husband. I'm like, this is where I am. If I don't come back, come find me. It was real. It was totally fine. But yeah, it was honestly super random happenstance. I feel
Right.
like a lot of things that happen, like it just feels so random. I just feel really lucky. But I think part of that luck is because I just go out. I'm like, just throw something out there and see what happens. And the more you do, the luckier you become. So,
Yeah. And you did touch on something. I would like to kind of go back to it just a little bit. You did talk about how we need to have our own confidence in ourselves, right? There's definitely that foundational piece. It's great. The affirmation from other people is great. How did you start to work on overcoming the self-doubt and like just embracing your journey as a writer?
so for poetry, I think that one really came from a professional growth program I did called the San Marcos Writing Project. I teach and kind of coordinate the youth writing camps through Cal State San Marcos. I teach the middle and the high school ones. And in order to do that, I did a pro grow throughout for 2 months, all of summer. And we had to do a bunch of writing and a bunch of sharing. And I think what really helped me feel more confident in my writing is just the amount of workshop and sharing. The more you share your writing with immediacy feedback, I feel really helps you grow more confident. And the more you see yourself improve, the more confident you become. Because confidence oftentimes happens after experience. So you have to have the experience, and then through that, that's how you become more competent and how stronger. So the better you get, the more confident you oftentimes become. And like I said, I started teaching martial arts when I was 16, and I had to go through a 7-month training program. And one of the things I was like not confident about because I was young, I've never taught before, and to teach other people in front of other people, it's terrifying. This whole fake it until you become it was kind of something that I did my mantra in my head. I'm like, just fake it, and one day I'll become it. And that's what you do. And it's kind of what ended up happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that's the reaffirming cycle too. Like you start off and you either believe or you don't believe or you have like a neutral stance. You do something that will work you towards your goal. Then you have this outside confirmation and then it builds your confidence and then it's like this loop of like, okay, the confidence makes it real in my head. So now it's just kind of like going back through the cycle of
It's
yeah.
cyclical.
But
Yeah.
you have to start.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the thing is like you'll never get that cycle. You'll never develop that belief if you don't start.
Exactly. And like I think everyone should have a team. Like you need a cheerleader that's going to cheerleader for you no matter what. And then you also need someone who's still cheerleader for you, but is like going to, I don't want to say tell you the truth, but like give you critical like feedback, But you need both, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so
So have you developed like your own personal like craft or approach on how you do that with your writing and your dark fiction?
yeah, so with my dark fiction like fantasy, so my current series is a paranormal urban fantasy taking place in San Diego, which is fun. But generally speaking, the way I kind of structure that was I do a stream of consciousness sort of thing, and I can't turn off my monitor on my laptop. I used to do it on my PC, but I would open up a document, I would set a timer for 1 hour, and I would just write constantly. And there's like a bunch of messed up words and things. And a lot of it's also like, I don't know what I'm saying right now. And I just write stuff like that. But it's not actually the book. It's just like, what do I want from this book? What's like just coming out of my brain? And I would do that for an hour straight. And I would end up with like pages of just random fluff, but also just idea generation. Like, what do I want for this character? Ooh, talk about this setting. Ooh, now I want to do this. And what about that? So I do that first to kind of get some ideas down. And then what I do is I usually go in and I figure out like who do I want in my book that's going to support these ideas that readers are going to want to connect with, what I want to connect with. Because if I can't connect with that, right, that I don't know, villain or whatever, I'm not going to be able to write them very easily. So I would start developing them. I'm going to have what's it called? Like a Spotify playlist in the front of my book. Because
Oh
it's always fun to
yeah.
have music involved with it to get you kind of going. But after you
Yeah.
figure out those characters and those ideas, that's when I do a little bit of plotting. And I know there's pantsers and plotters, but I do general plotting. So I'm like, okay, beginning part, denouement, then here's like the catalyst that really starts things going. Here's where like the fun part sort of deal. Then here's like the fake win or the fake loss, the dark part, and then like the conclusion. And I kind of structure it that way. It's very similar to Save the Cat, writes a novel. So good.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I would kind of like fill that out. And then once I'm like, okay, I think I'm pretty much ready to go, you start one page at a time, one word at a time. And I mean, my rough draft and my outline is so different from what has actually come out, but you need a place to
Yeah.
start, and that's how I
Yeah.
like to start it.
Yeah. And then when you finish it, do you have like beta readers that you send it to? You said you have like, needing that critique and whatnot. What happens after you finish your, I guess not first draft, your rough finalized draft?
Right. So, like I said, I'm signed with Fox and Dagger Publishing. So essentially, what it is, I had my first draft. I sent it to her. She looked through it and gave me some big sweeping stuff for a small part, and I made those changes. And she said, "Great." So she went through the whole thing and just wrote up an entire step of like, think about this, consider that, how these changes. And I said, "Great." So I took like a month and a half, and I just filled that in. I jumped another 10,000 words, things like that, jumped parts, added more here, things like that. And I sent it back to her. She copy edited it. And then she sent it out to her own personal like beta readers. And when she got that feedback back, she typed it all up, sent it back to me for the next round of edits and development. So I moved into there. So it's a process, which is really,
Yeah,
I
it really
know, but
is.
I love I'm like, this is what writing is. It is a process to develop and get better as this thing. It's so cool to see it evolve like a Pokemon or something.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, because like you have to get it to this level before it evolves into this next thing.
Yeah. So I think we're on our hopefully
Yeah.
last level of
I love that
edits.
you I love that you compared that to Pokemon. Was so relatable for me.
Thanks. But that's kind of how the process has
Um,
been.
that's cool. I love like everyone who has their process, and I'm sure you can relate to this is you hear all these different processes and you take what works and leaves what
Yeah.
doesn't.
And one of the things that I got from Stephen King, I read On Writing as a lit circle book in 10th grade, and it stayed with me. I think I've bought 5 copies of that book because I keep giving it away to people, sort of deal. I remember actually buying that book, and I knew my future husband, who was super into at the time and still am, wanted to read that book, and I like gave it to him to borrow, and he thought I gave it to him to keep, which meant I had to date him to get it back. But so I bought my version of that book.
You had a game plan.
Exactly. But, one of the things he says is murder your darlings, even if it breaks your poor little writer's heart, murder your darlings. And there are parts where I'm like, I really like that part, but I understand why it doesn't belong here. So what I like to do is I call it my cemetery document, where I take the parts that I
Mm.
loved and I put it in the little graveyard document. So one day, if I
I
ever
love
need
that
it,
so much.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is things that you have developed to make you still love the craft,
Yeah.
because people who have to murder scenes that they like, that can be devastating for them to where they're like, I don't like doing this anymore. But you have still found a way to, okay, I'm going to save this for later because it was really freaking good, guys.
That's what I feel anyway. So that's kind of what I do with it.
I like that. So Sagittarius, the first book in your Urban Oracle series, that comes out in February, so next
It's
month.
like February,
Is
March.
that
So it's
correct?
going to be February, March area. We're still figuring out the exact date, but yes, absolutely. So it's coming out really soon this spring, which is really exciting. Sorry, am I connecting?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you
Okay,
now.
cool. Sorry about that. I have terrible internet
That's
connection.
okay.
But yeah,
You're
so we're
fine.
still figuring out like end February, beginning March sort of deal.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've kind of talked a little bit about that book, but kind of tell me about what can readers expect with that?
Okay. So if you take like Constantine plus like Supernatural, the show, and you blend it together with a strong female character as like the main character, and you add in a ghost for the 1920s that's stuck as a 17-year-old and a really sexy guardian of the beyond that comes down to capture these entities that are based on the different astrological signs that have burst forth from the beyond to reign terror essentially in the gaslamp of San Diego. That is kind of what you got for my series. So it has a bunch of magic and like ghosts, like seances and things. I brought like tarot into it. Astrology is built into it, which I had to do a bunch of research on because at the time I just thought it was a really cool concept, but I only knew anything about Gemini because that's what I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know mine. I don't know anyone else. So found family is important. It's kind of like a slow burn romance, although I ended up shortening the series. So it got a little bit faster with that one in particular. Snarky dialogue between like the characters because snarky dialogue is like my favorite thing ever. I've always loved Creature of the Week stuff. Those were my favorite episodes of like Supernatural and things like that. So I really embedded those with my demonic, like, like astrological entity characters a lot, which has been so much fun to be able to take those personas and think, what would a demon from the beyond utilize that is based on this particular astrological sign and build from there. So that's kind of what I got.
That's cool. Now, is this the same series that you accidentally named the love interest after your
Okay,
husband?
hold on. Yes. Hold on. But yes. So okay, I needed a name that is like a guardian of like purgatory, a guardian of heaven, things like that. And I was looking up names and I didn't like Gabriel and I didn't like this. And I looked at what Michael meant and it literally meant guardian. And I'm just like, oh no, it has to be. Like I have to make it this one right there. So that's what I ended up doing. My poor husband, he'll deal with it later. It's fine. He
Yeah,
knows.
yeah.
But that's why I always make that.
It's a different Michael, babe.
It's a different Michael. You're still my favorite one. But that is why I like to say like I found my book husband before I found my book itself because my book husband was first and now I have my book to embed him in. So that's my whole thing. It's like, and I mean, the series is dedicated to my husband who doesn't believe in astrology, but he believes in me. And that's really important. So,
Oh, that's great. Oh my gosh. So one last question before we ask about your social medias and where to find you is you have two cats, right? Toad
yeah.
and Cucumber. We saw them walking around in the background a little
We
bit.
got Toad.
Um,
Hello. That's one. Hey, Cucumber, come here. Oh, no, she knew what was happening. She's gone. She'll be back.
yeah, she's like, bye later.
She's swift.
If they could talk, what would they say about your? Oh, she gonna push
She's
something off.
pushing my bowl. I'm like, you can't be pushing that. Honey, look at this. You want this
That's
bowl?
funny. I'm waiting for something to crash in the
Oh,
background.
God. I'm amazed it's been so quiet for this long. Found her. Aha. And this is Cucumber. Hello, little baby.
Oh my
I love
gosh.
you so much.
Your little bobtail.
Yeah, we think she actually had a full tail, but we found her during COVID as a little stray. And we think her tail got, sort of deal. But
Yeah.
she still walks
Dang.
around and lives her best life. But yeah, sorry, I want you to see my cats. They're important to me.
No, yeah, I know. That's why I wanted to bring them up because they're kind of a staple in a lot of, your personality on social media. What do you think that they would have to say about like your writing process and what you're doing?
Probably why is mom home and not dad would be a big one. Also go to bed. It's late. The last developmental edits I did like a writing sprint, and at like 3 a.m, Toad, my gray one, walks onto my keyboard, and I don't know if anyone knows the feeling of a cat that starts to vomit, but you start seeing the thing. I'm like, oh my god! So she started to vomit on my actual computer itself. I'm gonna get rid of that.
Oh my gosh, how terrifying.
No, it was great. So she started doing that, and I got her on the tile, and then she ran under the bed where we had to find our way under the bed to clean that up. So I can't say that they're supportive, but they're at least interesting. So yeah.
Oh man, they're just their little. I always think that gods are, or not gods. I always think that cats are little gods. Like just they're like, okay, a servant, peasant,
Ugh, they
human.
totally are, but let's be real, they're little like fuzzy gremlins that we love to pick up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now if people want to hear more about Toad and Cucumber, they can go to your social medias because you have them as well as your books. Where can people go to find
So
you?
I am primarily on Instagram and Threads. So Zounes, right? So Z is in zebra, OUNESWRITES. I have a website, zoneswrites.com, that I need to update to be better about. So I got that going on. Those are the primary places. I need to get on Facebook, and with everything going on with possible banning of TikTok and things, I will be
Possible.
spreading
Possible because we
out.
just got I think that that's a story in itself for people listening.
God,
Before this episode, we were talking about the TikTok ban, and Sierra pulled open her phone, and TikTok was working.
I don't know what's happening anymore. But those are where you can find me in general.
Alrighty, Sierra, you are amazing. This is such a fun conversation and a huge deep dive into your life. I think it's so interesting how stress plays into pushing us into our roles of like, either you're going to continue to be stressed or you're just going to go down the path that you're meant to. Which one do you want? Do you want blackouts or do you want to find your authentic self?
One of the two, I would much better do the latter. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of L3. We'll see you on the
All
next
right,
one.
thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemons Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.